delivered. Guam AutoSpot is extending our overstock sell-off with the hottest deals on island, like our 2025 GMC Canyon with $4,000 off. Or slide into a brand new Mitsubishi Eclipse Cross, starting at just $24,995. September is your chance to drive big and save even bigger. Visit us today or get pre-approved online at guamautospot.com or call 478-AUTO. Guam AutoSpot, where the savings never stop.
Buy fuel, get Wendy's. Drive to your nearest 76 Circle K and get free Wendy's. Yes, free. Fuel up with $30 and score your choice of a 6-piece crispy chicken nuggets or a juicy junior cheeseburger deluxe. Fresh, hot, and packed with flavor. But hurry, quantities are limited and this delicious deal won't last long. So hit the road to 76 Circle K, fuel up, and get Wendy's free before it's gone.
It's me, Wednesday Addams. I regret to inform you that I have devised the meal of misfortune with Wendy's. Normally I'd be against this type of capitalistic corporate synergy. But when the other pigtailed provocateur said I could concoct my own Frosty, I melted. My meal is tribute to the suffering that awaits us all. It's pure torture for your taste buds, with 4 nightmarish dips of dread. Don't waste my time asking which ones you'll get. You must surrender to your fate. Enjoy the anguish.
Dare to try? Something new? Life's too short!
You gotta chill with a snackable drink.
Life is too short. Hey, you gotta chill.
Mogu Mogu.
Moku Moku! Kandit News is brought to you by 76 Circle K Guam.
Good evening, my dear friends. It is 8:37 p.m. on Sunday, September 28, 2025. We're almost done with the first of the Burr months, which means Christmas is that much closer to us. My name is Troy Torres. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. I know it's pretty late on a Sunday night. It's the first day of the week, so it's the most exciting day of the week for me because of, today's the Lord's Day. I go to church, and that's always just the most beautiful way for me to start the week. And I do these extra prayers. Anyway, beautiful day. And I hope you had a beautiful day as well. Good evening, Brother Brennan Foster and my sister Teresa Garcia. And all of you who are joining live and those of you who will join in the replay, thank you so much for your interest in this topic. Before I get to it, can I just ask you, I don't know if you can see my hair clearly. It's I have poofy hair. So I'm if you haven't heard me talk about this before, I'm half Chamorro and the other half of me is quarter Palauan and quarter Japanese, and so my hair is very much Palauan hair. Like it's poofy. And I have nice curls. Don't get me wrong, and I really love my curls, but it becomes unmanageable. So my question to you is, should I shave my head? And I'm not talking about just cutting my hair short. Like I cut my hair short all the time. Should I shave my head or have my barber shave my head? Just go full on, let me know. Good evening, Sister Jen. Thanks for joining. I really appreciate you, and I love you so much. Buenas, Chaluje. I appreciate you. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you, all of you. So tonight we present to you the second of the interviews that I've been able to have. I have had the pleasure of having with candidates for Superintendent of Education. The first one we had last week with Erica Cruz. She's a former Deputy Superintendent of Education under John Fernandez, longtime teacher and administrator. She's currently the principal of JP Torres Success Academy and Liheng Famaguan. Yesterday, I had the pleasure of interviewing Joe Sanchez, who at the time that Erica Cruz came in as the Deputy Superintendent under John Fernandez, Joe Sanchez came in as the Deputy Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction under John Fernandez. He continues into that role. He continues to be the Deputy Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction. Prior to that, he was a school administrator, and prior to that, he was a teacher. I'm sorry, he was also the Administrator of Research Planning and Evaluation between the time of being an administrator and the head of Curriculum and Instruction. Essentially, Mr. Sanchez is aside from the superintendent, Mr. Sanchez is the instructional leader of the Guam Department of Education. And there are 7 candidates. Oh, I'm getting feedback. Teresa and Jay both said, no, do not shave my head. Okay, maybe I won't shave my head then. Maybe I'll let it grow just a little bit longer. So, we are told by Damon Borja, the PIO for GDOE, that there are 7 candidates for superintendent who submitted their applications on time. Whether there will remain 7 candidates is yet to be known. I believe HR and whoever is in charge Maria Gutierrez, the board member, is in charge of the selection committee over the board. I'm not sure who is responsible for doing this, but someone or some group of people are responsible for determining who qualifies and who does not qualify. So we don't know if all 7 will move forward or just, a certain number. We're not sure yet. But Erica Cruz and Joe Sanchez felt comfortable enough that they qualified for this job, that when I called out and I invited all 7 of the candidates to contact me and to accept my invitation to be interviewed and for this interview to play on Kandit, only 2 people have reached out, and that's Erica Cruz and Joe Sanchez. I'm told that a 3rd candidate is going to be reaching out to me, and that's Barbara Adamas, who is currently a Deputy Superintendent of Education. So the interesting thing about this is that, so I've heard that these 3, I'd heard through the grapevine prior to them confirming, right, that these 3 were the ones who had applied. I've heard of 1 or 2 other people possibly applying, but they are not within GDOE. So I'd heard that these 3, all within GDOE, all either former or current deputy superintendents of education, and I find it interesting that they're the only ones who have so far come forward to say, yeah, I'd like to present myself to your audience. I'm told that Dr. Adamas is going to be reaching out. So just assuming that she does, I find it interesting that these are the 3 who came forward and said, I want to be interviewed. I want to make my case before your audience. And the reason that I find that interesting, aside from a bunch of other things, is when you think about it, these are the 3 who've been in GDOE. They've been sort of the behind the scenes kind of people, right? In their various jobs. It's not like the public is all that familiar with who they are. And sometimes things can be a popularity contest in this island, right? Even with the Board of Education deciding, even with a CCU deciding, or a Board of Commissioners deciding, right? Things tend to become popularity contests, especially when you look at big jobs like these. And it's possible that whoever are the other 4 applicants have big names. They might be politicians who have automatic name recognition. So the fact that these 3 who are, sort of like behind the scenes, now we've heard their names every now and then. We've seen them every now and then in the news, but we don't know as a general audience that much about them. And so I very much appreciate that these 2, Erica Cruz and Joe Sanchez, already have done their interviews, and that I'm told Dr. Adamas will be reaching out to accept my invitation to interview her. I appreciate that very much. And I think our audience appreciates that very much. Anyway, enough with me. This was the interview that I conducted yesterday with Joe Sanchez. Just like the first interview with Erica Cruz, it was conducted at Cold Stone Creamery and GPO. Cold Stone is our advertiser, and we thank them so much for allowing us to use their wonderful backdrop, because nothing says, nothing says wanting to do things for kids like doing an interview right in front of ice cream. Brennan says, bald is beautiful. Let it shine. You're the tip of the spear. Amen. Oh, I got one vote for bald. We'll see. Anyway, here's that interview with Joe Sanchez. Good afternoon. This is Troy Torres. I'm behind the camera. It is 1:27 p.m. on Saturday, the 27th of September, 2025. And I'm here with Joe Sanchez, the Deputy Superintendent of Education for Curriculum over at the Department of Education.
Good afternoon,
Mr. Sanchez, good afternoon.
Hello, good afternoon.
Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
And I appreciate it. You are running for Superintendent of Education?
Yes, I'm an applicant.
Well, you are a candidate, or you're an applicant
Candidate,
for a
yeah.
Superintendent of Education. I'm sorry, it's like the Super Bowl of jobs in this island. And as I've said to our audience on video editorial on Kandit, I consider this to be the most important job in Guam, more important than the job of the governor, and for a whole bunch of different reasons. And I'm sure that you can relate. And so, Mr. Sanchez, let's just get right to it. Rather than asking you the standard question, why are you running, or why are you applying for the job of superintendent, let me put it this way. What is it about your experience as the Deputy Superintendent of Education for Curriculum that you're going to bring to the job of superintendent that is going to improve public schools?
Well, I guess first of all, what it's given me is really an opportunity to see the entire department in both its good and bad pieces. When I first started, one of the first assignments that I had to take on, you're probably familiar with this because this was around the Cowboy administration, was the implementation of the Common Core state standards. And in the past, and I've been told by this with other folks who've worked in curriculum, is that adoption was simpler. It was just you get the materials, you get the standards, and then you just pass it out and they say, okay, this is now your standards. What we had back then is it was coupled with ending of two major reform programs, the direct instruction program, the successful program. I was the director for both, and then those programs eventually went away. So our challenge was not just adopting and implementing a Common Core program, is now we had to retrain so many teachers, thousands of teachers, who were trained previously. And for teachers who taught less than 10 years, all they knew was the reform program. So they only knew the direct instruction. They only knew success for all. So a lot of them didn't even read the previous standards. And again, that was one of our challenges. Our standards were not aligned to the instructional program, and they were definitely not aligned to our assessment system. So that was kind of a whole mess there. So, getting that assignment, that big assignment, we had to immediately pull out, the strategy, right? And we laid out a 3-year strategy. We had to make sure teachers understood the standard. That took a whole year. We trained in instructional strategies. And then the 3rd year, we were able to implement a new assessment system. So around that time, I was also given a chance to lead the strategic plan in 2014, and then later on, so many years later in 2022, where I got a chance to, really get information from a lot of folks, pull together teachers, pull together administrators, pull together administrators, and that gave us a wider view of where we wanted to see the department. The 2014 plan was titled 2020, A Clear Vision for Education on Guam. We really liked that because it took a chance to, it gave us a chance to use the 2020 year as the idea of the vision piece, where we laid out 4 areas that are now continuing to be implemented today. In some cases, some people would say this is standard. One was the professional learning communities model, which was totally based on capacity building, right? Our reform programs were not based on capacity building. They were based on implementation, where here's your script, this is how you do it. So a capacity building model does not provide a script. It doesn't tell them this is how you do something. It provides you the research, it provides you the training, it provides you the resources, and then it provides you the support so that you can implement the programs yourself in your classroom and in the schools. So that was number one. the
Would that,
professional learning communities
would you
model.
say that that would mark your tenure as superintendent, continuing, maybe not that sort of strategy, but that sort of
Approach?
outlook and attitude and approach?
Yes, absolutely. You know, because that strategic plan, and again, this is all done with teachers, administrators, and people giving, you know, recommendations. And the capacity building approach was agreed upon. Everyone said, this is it. You need to build capacity on the island, right? That's a big one. It's the professional learning communities. The second part is clarifying the processes for what's called curriculum instruction, assessment, and interventions. It's putting deliberate steps in there where teachers, administrators, instructional staff have to break through the standards, discuss it on a regular basis, develop what we call proficiency skills, where they're able to identify levels of the standard, you know, where it's not just good enough to say, here's the standard, figure it out. And of course, how are you going to teach that in the classroom? The instructional piece, we spent the whole year training teachers on effective instructional strategies. And again, these are models that are implemented to this day still. Classroom instruction that works. Sheltered instruction observation protocol, which supports English learners. Literacy strategies, which again, the research continues to show that these are successful programs, not just throughout the country, but you know, throughout the world.
Is it working on Guam?
It is. I would argue that it is, especially considering that our scores are coming out much higher in the high schools. The last 2 years were the highest scores in literacy that we've ever had in the last 20 years.
And it's because you started to implement this more than 10 years ago. So what you're seeing is from the kids who started in kindergarten
years.
or first grade. And I do remember there was all during this time, the Department of Education increased its focus on, maybe focus is the wrong word, but increased its attention to ensuring that children were at standard, were reading at standard by the third grade so that they would not fall behind in the later years?
So we actually, yeah, you're right. So we actually broke it up into K2, 3, 4, middle school, and then high school, and that's been our model kind of ever since.
Okay.
The idea is to get them into those incremental phases.
And so this is working.
We believe that it is.
Okay.
You know, again, the data is showing it. I mean, I know that we got a lot of folks who kind of criticize and say, well, it's not going up enough. I said, okay, well, I agree, right? They're not improving enough, but they are improving a lot. And when you look at it from a perspective of the last 20 years, you see that from 2003 up until 2014, 15, 16, 17, our scores were going up, and we have the data that shows it. Then from there, I mean, yeah, COVID hit, but even despite COVID hitting, we moved into a more difficult assessment, but yet our scores still went up.
I want to ask you, I want to stick on this subject because it's important to me, and I don't know if you've heard me talk about this on Kandit. I know when I was in the governor's office, you probably, I don't know if you remember me talking about this, but I'm fond of saying that the problems that we have today are the result of the failures of education and society 20, 30 years ago. And how, you know, where we failed to provide resources in a whole bunch of different respects, whether they're for teachers, whether it's for, you know, raising a new generation of good citizens, addressing the issue of poverty, but definitely centering around the education of children. Where we failed, you know, 2-3 decades ago, we're now seeing these people as entering the criminal justice system, mental health issues that go untreated, addiction issues, etc. First, do you agree either all the way or somewhat with my assessment? And secondly, if you do agree in any way, can you tell us that the changes that have been made over the past 10, 12 years are changing that?
Yes, I agree with you wholeheartedly because I've heard you talk about this in depth where you're not blaming just the education system. In fact, I don't think you use the word blame, right? You're attributing it to not just the education system, but the government's lack of support for the education system, funding, and all of those things, right? So it's not just educators and teachers and whatnot.
No, I've never blamed teachers alone. It's just an entire system.
Absolutely, right? The whole system, because obviously every generation, right? Every generation that's come before us did the best job that they can with the resources that they had.
And the leadership that they had.
And the leadership that they had, right? So, you know, in graduate school, there's a whole section that we study regarding educational foundations and the impact of education in societies and how they developed and whatnot. We studied places like Japan and so on, right, where they knew that education had to be the first thing that they would address before there can be economic prosperity in society and so on. I wholeheartedly agree with that. On Guam, I totally believe that as well. I believe that education is really the key to long-term prosperity for every individual and the island, because people need to have the wherewithal to understand the world around them. We're not talking direct just about high test scores, right? And I know that a lot of folks out there say that, oh, we don't stop focusing on the scores, and I get that. I was the administrator for research, planning, and evaluation. Test scores are not the only measure that we need to use to show that our students are successful, but they are important, because if we're going to take the same assessments as our mainland counterparts, a lot of our students leave island and they live in the United States. We want to give them an opportunity to do just as well as anybody who grows up in any of the states or in any one of these other foreign countries where literacy is going to be important. And I'm a proponent of career technical education. In fact, right now, we're kind of leading the last 2 years with our schools in continuing to develop our career and technical education programs, making sure that we not only prepare students for going to college, but are they going to have a job, you know, when they graduate? But the idea is you still need those foundational skills in both literacy and math in order to be successful. I think one of the challenges that we've had in the past is, I guess, you know, one thing that they say about education is education research tends to be 10 to 15 years behind business research, right? So, you know, business schools and whatnot. I know schools of education might not like that, right? I don't know if our school of education would like that comment, but that's kind of like an unspoken reality. Business research tends to come out with more innovative things that eventually education picks up. So the concept of the professional learning community and capacity building came up, you know, in education around the 90s. Prior to that, the private sector was doing this in the 80s. They're called collaborative teaming. Engineers, for crying out loud, used to do it, where now they realize that you can't just be an engineer in one field. You had to train engineers on how to collaborate so that they can work together with other folks, and they have to work with the finance people, they have to work with the designers. So all of those models were already taking place in business communities, you know, throughout the world, I guess. And in the research, that education started to pick it up in the 90s. Guam started to get trained on that around 2005 and 6, but it was never implemented district-wide. It was just a few of us who kind of paid attention and were like, hey, we support this research and so on. So,
I remember that DOE was starting to develop it or implement it district-wide in 2012,
yeah.
when we were doing when the governor's office was teaming up with GDOE with the education reform initiative that Governor Calvo had.
Absolutely. So right when we knew that we had to implement the standards, we had to come up with the model for training, right? And again, I mentioned about the previous models where it's just, here's the standards, you know, figure them out and then teach them in the classroom. That's how we were taught when it came to the previous standards. So we wanted to make sure that there was a deliberate process for teachers and administrators and instructional staff to actually be able to talk it out. You need to discuss what the standards look like. You need to be able to discuss, you know, ways to teach it in your classroom. And more importantly, there needs to be an alignment to the measures that are going to determine whether or not those students are learning. If those three areas are not aligned, then you're just kind of spinning your wheels. I mean, your system is not going to be effective.
So Joe, despite, I'm sorry, pardon me,
No,
Mr. Sanchez,
yeah.
Mr. Sanchez,
No,
despite,
yeah.
I want to keep this standard. You know, because I've known you and Erica for a long time, and so when I was interviewing her, I kept calling her Erica, and I said, I'm so sorry, Miss Cruz, Mr. Sanchez, Mr. Sanchez. Are you telling me that despite the government's failures in providing for the maintenance and facilities, refurbishment and construction of, or provision of resources and good facilities for the kids, despite all these other deficiencies outside of classroom learning, despite even teachers having enough resources, so school supplies, despite teachers not being paid enough, are you telling me that over the past 13 years, 15 years, etc., that you guys have managed to turn a corner anyway?
I believe so, because I think one of the components, well, let me just finish the components of the strategic plan. It's real simple. Those deliberate processes in curriculum, instructional strategies, the assessment system. The third part to that was the comprehensive student assessment system. So the idea is that our previous assessment system was just a SAT-10. Like literally, they would ask us, what is our assessment system? It was just really one test given at the end of the year. It wasn't even aligned to the standards. So even though that was kind of like the main thing that judged the curricular program, it wasn't really telling us much about how effective our instruction was and what our students were actually
Because it wasn't tied together.
It wasn't tied together. But the fourth component is answering the question that you just asked. The fourth component was, how do we make our system more effective and more efficient with the resources that we have?
Okay.
Because we knew, I mean, it's not that we were pessimistic or we didn't believe the government was not going to support us, because we believe that senators and everybody will try to support us as much as they can. So I've always been a realist where I understand that there's a larger government that they have to worry about. So when we were doing that strategic plan back then, we tried to make sure that everything that we were doing was supported by the resources that we have. A steady budget, regular grants that were a certain amount, right? And making sure that we're more efficient, we're basically doing more with less. And that helped a lot to get us off high risk. You know, I mean, I'm not a finance person. I didn't handle the money when it came to the grants, but the processes that we used, whether it be the fixed assets inventory, hiring the right personnel, training the right personnel, all of that contributed to making sure that we were able to get off high risk, because it's people that had to do that. So same thing goes with the teachers. And I honestly and truly want to give credit to a lot of the teachers and the administrators, because I admit, you know, that we've asked them to work so hard. You know, I'm not saying that just when I got on board. You know, I mean, they worked hard before that. But you know, when I became the deputy superintendent, and you can talk to them, they're gonna be like, "Oh my gosh, Joe's making us do this and this and this." And you know, I would try to make them understand that these are research-proven strategies. These are things that have been proven to work in other arenas. The collaborative piece, the effective instructional strategies, the assessment systems, all of those were research proven that we want to implement. And then they'll say, okay, what resources can you provide us? Well, we can provide you with a lot of training. At the time, they'll ask us for books. We had to buy books little by little, because the amount was it's like $1.5 million on an annual basis. That just covers like one grade level, and it doesn't even cover all subjects. So we were never able to get them a lot of materials, right? The internet was a big thing, because do you remember the ARA funds from 2010 that was managed?
Yeah.
That was the first time we were able to buy teachers' laptops.
I remember that.
That was the first time we were able to buy mobile carts. And you know, Governor Calvo at the time, you guys were always telling us, make sure you spend your money right, make sure you spend your money right. That's what we invested a lot of that money into, is the technology, getting teachers those materials. We didn't buy books. I don't think we were allowed to buy books at the time, but we were able to provide other resources that they eventually used. So, you know, it was really the teachers being, you know, creative and pulling stuff off the internet, using the materials that we did give them. You know, some of them kept the DI books and the SFA books from previous years, which is perfectly fine. Reading material is reading material, right? And they're on grade level, so use the high quality material that you already have. So I guess in a nutshell, to answer your question is, yes, I believe teachers, administrators, staff, we've learned how to make do. That doesn't mean we don't need more. I mean, one of the presentations that I did at the beginning of the year, remember I mentioned we talked about reference scores, where we can't just look at our scores just at face value. You have to look at it in comparison to previous years and other jurisdictions, right? So we compared ourselves to California, Washington, and Oregon. All of those states were scoring in 45%, 40%, you know, and Hawaii is actually at 51%. So Hawaii was the higher scoring of those states. But when you break it down into Pacific Islanders, socioeconomic status, they were scoring in the 30s. Well, some of our schools are higher than that. So, you know, we have to give kudos to those schools that are scoring higher than states like California and Washington. Washington is terrible. When you just aggregate it based on Pacific Islander and socioeconomic status, they drop to the 20s, 20%. When our schools are in the average of 31%, 25. Now granted, not all schools are at that same level. Not all schools are progressing as fast as they could. And that's definitely something that I want to address. But the fact that a number of our schools are shows us that we can do it. We can actually achieve at high levels. We just need to look at what's being done in those schools and replicate that.
Before I move on to the subject of resources, because it's a perfect segue from where you were just talking about resources, I do want to ask, one last thing regarding what's been happening with the kids over the past several years. So you talked about how high schoolers right now, and when they started in school, this was around the same time that you were implementing those theories, or those that you theorized at the time. You and John Fernandez and the team theorized at the time that these things would work because of all the best research throughout the country, et cetera, right? I remember that. And so now you're informing us that those kids are now in high school, and we've had the best scores for that grade level, or for those grade levels ever in Department of Education. So then, do you suppose that as the years go by and more of these kids who are in that entire cohort, right? Do you think there's going to be an upward trend?
I believe so.
And if you think there's going to be an upward trend, what more do you want to do as superintendent to see that go up, so that we're not talking about being in the 31 percentile anymore, but now we're talking about being in the 40-some percentile or the 50-some percentile?
Sure. So let me add a little bit more to that answer earlier about the resources and the different states. A lot of those states, even though some of our schools are scoring at or the same or higher than some of those states, we also looked at what they were spending per pupil. California, and I might mess up these numbers, right? But when we did the presentation, California spends about $21,000 per student. If you took that same $21,000 per student and just used our 23,000 students, our budgets would be over $400 million. Same thing with Washington and Hawaii and whatnot. They're all around $17,000 to $21,000 per student. Guam spends, I believe it's $11,000, right? So can you imagine what the Department of Education can do with a $400 million budget? I mean, we can do quite a bit. Now,
you could pay your teachers a lot more.
We can pay our teachers a lot more. You know, right now our teachers, and a lot of people that I speak to who are not teachers, don't understand this, because in their minds, teachers are getting paid a lot because they get paid more than them.
No, they're not getting paid a lot.
Well, if you compare them to like the average person on the street, teachers do
just
get paid
because
a lot.
everyone else is getting paid low amounts of money doesn't mean that teachers
so
are
I
getting
have
paid
to
a lot of
explain
money.
to them what that means. When you compare a teacher's pay, you're not comparing them to the average person on the street, because you have to compare them to people who work at that same level or who get the same degrees or the same requirements. You have to have a degree. You have to get certified. You have to specialize in a particular area. A starting teacher gets paid $40-some thousand in the department, which is more than when I started. I started at 26.
Yeah, but when you started, that was a long time ago.
Not that long. Yeah, it's a while.
But
in
you know,
the 90s,
yeah.
right? A program coordinator 1 starts at around the same level. A program coordinator 1, no offense to program coordinator 1s, but they don't require a degree. And they require like entry level skills.
And they're also not teaching the next generation.
And they're not teaching the next generation. Yeah. So that's what we mean by teachers need to pay a comparable wage to engineers, to accountants, to folks who are in a professional position, because right now they're not. And over time, that has an impact. Yeah. So that's true. What we can do is a lot more if we had more resources. But I'm under the understanding that we're never going to get a $400 million budget, right?
Well, let's go there. I want to go there because you almost sound fatalist in it. You call yourself a realist, but you've worked with the legislature as the deputy for curriculum. So to be fair, it's not like you've been asked about budgets that much. You've not been asked about the total management of the department that much, right? But you already have a relationship with the government, and because of the position that you're already in.
Right.
If you're the superintendent of education, do you have some sort of goal or some sort of plan to go before senators and say something along the lines of, look, if you guys really value education, let me tell you right now, you're not giving us enough on an annual basis, and we need this much more just for the basic stuff. But I'm not asking you for the basic stuff. I'm asking you for more for our kids. And so is that something
Yes.
you're willing to, okay.
Yes, I do.
So you're not a fatalist then?
I'm not a fatalist, but at the same time, let's be real, $400 million, that's a lot. I don't think the government can
But
afford
don't you
that.
think that
We
the
have to
senators
find
should be
something.
putting their money where their mouths are?
I do.
Because it's a
I do.
$1.3 billion budget.
I do, definitely. But I think it's also, we also have a responsibility to make sure that they trust us with the funds that we have.
Okay.
And I can say this, being at the highest level in the Department of Education, I see that they don't trust us, and I understand why.
Is there waste?
It's we are not showing them that we are using our funds correctly.
Okay.
One of the things that we just, or efficiently, right? Now I want to say correctly, right? But efficiently. A lot of us in the department, you know, in other divisions, we were surprised about the lapses. We heard about the lapses during the budget hearing. A lot of us watched the budget hearing just to see how it's going during the session. To find out there was 14, 15, $20 million lapses, we're like, what? That's the local budget. Why would the local budget have that issue? We're used to that being an issue with the federal funds. That's why we were on high risk. We weren't paying our money, or we weren't paying or using our grant money in the right cycle. We always were behind by 1 year because of procurement, because of personnel and so on. For a whole number of reasons, we weren't able to spend the money as fast as we did. So we get it. That's why we were on high risk. We were trying to improve that. We were improving, and we should be going in a better direction where we should no longer have that. But to find out that we have local lapses was a surprise to a lot of us, because we're like, what? We're already short on our budget, but yet we're not spending the money that we have. And then the response that we got, and I don't want to do a whole back and forth internally, but the response that we got was, oh, because procurement didn't go through. Oh, because we didn't hire the employees. I go, that's the same issues that we were having with federal. It feels like we're going backwards, and we can't do that. What we need to do before we go to the legislature, before we start asking them for more money, is fix our internal, I'm sorry, I'm getting kind of upset because this is how I get at some of these meetings. We've been saying this, is if we want more money from the legislature, we need to demonstrate that we're using the money that we have properly and use it well. And what even surprised us is not even knowing where those lapses are. We should, if it happens, it happens. But when it does happen, we should be able to say, this is exactly it. It's these contracts, or it's this procurement, or it's these personnel, right? That's something that I would do first, is make sure that we're able to respond to the senators responsibly. Because that's why they're saying, oh, we can't give you this money or whatnot. It's not because we don't have it. Because I think the amount that we asked for was reasonable. In fact, coincidentally, it was about the same amount that the hospital just got. Right? The hospital just got a certain amount. That was the money that we were quote unquote shorted. But we didn't make the argument enough for the senators to say, yeah, we think that you need that money. So that's the first thing I would do.
So you'll clean up the argument?
I would. I would make sure that, I would stay engaged in that whole conversation. And the questions that the senators ask, I would ask it too. I mean, probably I won't be as combative, right? I know sometimes our folks feel like they're attacked, and I know that senators don't mean to do that. But when I work with
a lot of times they just want answers.
Yeah, they just want answers, and I understand why they would be frustrated if either you're not clear, or they feel like you're holding back information, or worse yet, if you give 2 or 3 different answers at 3 different times when the same person or different people ask the same question. That's definitely one thing that I would do. But on top of that, once you get that settled, I would definitely explain to them where our money is going and why certain things need to be funded. Why do these materials need to be funded on a regular basis? For example, one of the things that we want to continue to support, which our regular grants are not able to support these things. Like, because most of our grants from USAID are designed to be supplemental, you cannot use them for primary functions. So you can't use them for teachers, you can't use them for textbooks. If you intend to give a student or a computer to every student, you can't use it for that. You have to break it up into programs, a whole bunch of requirements. So one of the things that we can't buy for everybody is school supplies. We can't say, every student in the department is going to get this number of school supplies. We can't say every teacher is going to get this number.
So you need something like a local match.
Yeah, exactly. The local government needs to cover that. What we do, we try, is we do it through our summer school program. So we give an allotment for summer school for teachers and students. We give an allotment for Aspire, which is after school and before school. We give an allotment for Escuela Empeño, which is night school. But that's only a fraction of our student population. So I think when we explain that and we let the senators know this is what we need you to absolutely add to the budget so that we can cover that, then I think they would be more agreeable to that. Same thing with the facilities and maintenance. I think it's happening because I think they realize that all these issues with the facilities and maintenance were just due to years of neglect. But one of the challenges that happened was something that I remember we were trying to avoid back in 2014-15 when we said, hey, can you lockbox this amount for facilities? Well, the challenge with that is if you just lockbox it but you don't give more, it eats into regular operations. So that's something that John always tried to avoid is, okay, I get it. If you're going to lockbox it, don't do it. We'll have to be the ones to set that priority. And unfortunately, if it can't be a priority now because you have to pay for something else, then you would kind of go into those particular areas. So, that's one thing that I think we have to do is try to clarify how much regular operations is, how much additional we need to provide like you said, the minimal supports to our students. But then kind of on top of that, if there's a facilities and maintenance issue which we need to continue, find a way so that it doesn't eat into our overall operational budget.
I want to move on to the next topic.
Sure.
Mr. Sanchez, do you work well with others?
Oh, I do. I believe I do. I mean, I believe the reason why I work well with others, I think they understand that I'm sincere. And I believe I have a reputation of being focused. I mean, I'm very student-centered. I'm very curriculum and instruction-centered. So people don't take things personally. At central office, and you can verify this, right? I
was going to ask, what would your staff say about you? What would your colleagues say about you?
I think they see that I try to solve problems. I mean, some people will say that I kind of cross lines where I'm going into somebody else's territory because I engage a lot with finance. I engage a lot with procurement. I engage a lot with personnel. But it's always for the purpose of trying to figure out and address problems. The first couple of months that the Deputy of Finance came on board, I was actually explaining a lot of processes to him. In fact, I still do so now, where it's like, this is the procurement process. This is why we need to have this. Same thing with the superintendent. I was able to kind of explain a lot of things. We have collaborative meetings that I facilitate. Now it's been other people facilitating it. But I started those because I would bring the people from procurement in with the people from federal programs and the business office and try to figure things out. Okay. So yeah, I believe so. I think the reason why is people know that even though I may be encroaching on somebody else's job, it's because I want to get something solved. And if you need help, I will help you.
Do you, forgive me if this is a stupid question, it's just I don't know what your workflow is. So do you often work with principals?
Oh, all the time.
Oh, so you work with principals
yeah,
all the time? Okay.
I am in terms of professional development, I'm the primary lead when it comes to principal professional development and everybody dealing with instruction. So teachers and other instructional staff meaning like ESL coordinators, special education, librarians, and so on.
Do you think that the principals will like that you are the superintendent of education?
I hope so. I think they would. First of all, I just want to say that.
Let me rephrase that.
Yeah.
Would they respect you if you were the superintendent of education?
I believe so. I believe I've earned the respect. First of all, I want to say that I'm excited that we have, at least we know of 3 qualified candidates. And if I could humbly say that I believe I'm qualified, but I believe Bobby is very qualified. She works directly with the principal.
You're talking about Dr. Adamas.
Dr. Adamas,
She's a deputy superintendent,
She's
right?
the acting deputy right now. She supervises principals. And of course, my good friend and work wife, we used to call each other Erica Cruz as the former deputy. She's been working with the principals for a long time.
You and Erica Cruz were brought up in the John Fernandez administration.
Yeah,
yes,
absolutely.
I remember that.
So I believe so. I work well with the principals. I was the primary lead when it comes to professional development with them, at least in the area of instructional leadership. right? The operations side, that's mostly Bobby and, I'm sorry, Dr. Damas and Erica. But I handle everything related to instruction. I've provided guidance to them over the years, and I believe they trust me. In fact, I want to point one thing out. You know, there's something I used to always say whenever I talk to principals, and John, Mr. Fernandez would always tell me, Joe, why do you keep saying that? I go, and this is what I would say. I would tell principals, hey, remember, I'm not the one who does your evaluation. I'm not your supervisor. So I'm a support division. And John, Mr. Fernandez would always ask me, why do you say that? I said, because I want the principals to be comfortable enough to call me when they don't understand something. If there's a report that's due and they're not turning it in, I want them to be comfortable enough to call me and say, hey, Joe, I need to sort more time on this, or can you explain this to me? So I feel like I've developed more of a supportive relationship with them. Evaluation, that's done by somebody else. So the biggest change, I think, would be if I became superintendent, is I would be more now on the supervisory side, where in addition to my deputy of ESEL, it would be more holding principals accountable and not just providing supports to them.
Well, let me ask then, how do you intend to earn the respect of not just principals, but also teachers and central office staff if you become the superintendent?
If I can presume to say, I believe I have earned their respect. I mean, teachers are the one population that I work with mostly. You know, when it comes to professional development, when it comes to guidance and instruction.
But perhaps you've earned their respect as deputy of curriculum, but what about as superintendent of education? It's a whole different job.
I would say trust.
Okay.
I think they would trust that I'm sincere.
Okay.
I mean, I believe in education so much, and because I believe in education so much in general, I believe that our people are the ones that need to be the ones to support and be uplifted, you know, to be build that capacity, right? That was a big part of the strategic plan, the previous one, and then the one that we have now. It's capacity building. How do you build up people? You build it up to professional development and training. You provide them the research. You provide them the structure, like what we've done, professional learning communities, collaborative teams, and most of all, you provide them the support. So I believe I've done that, and I believe that they know that I would continue to do that. Now, I know that they would say I'm tough and hard, you know, I expect a lot, but that's what we need to do for our students. I mean, I don't think anybody will support a superintendent or a department to say, oh yeah, let's just do enough. No, if we need to promote excellence, we need to promote excellence in ourselves. That means do the best job that you can. And I've never been in a situation where I said, you're not doing enough, you're not doing enough. I mean, if it looks like you're not doing enough, how can I support you so that you can, or be more efficient, or be more effective in a particular area? So, and I think that's the same way with central office, is they know my work ethic, they know how much I'm focused, they know that I've been a problem solver. But at the same time, if I were to become superintendent and be more supervisory, I think that would be the biggest change, is in addition to being more of a support personnel, I would be more of the one that says also, hey, you absolutely need to do this.
The drive and the journey to sustained excellence normally requires a carrot and a stick approach. And so you've talked a little bit about the stick, right? What's the carrot? You know, what is it that the teachers can expect that you would at least try to do to make life better for them?
I think if the analogy, if I'm interpreting the analogy correctly, it would be flipped. So it would be more of like the carrot would be what I'm talking about, with the PLCs, with the providing the research, with the making sure.
Oh no, I was talking about the stick when you were talking about how you've been tough on them. That's what I meant by the stick. But
okay.
So what are the things that you could do, or at least try to do as superintendent, that you think would appeal to teachers and aid in their pursuit of excellence? For example, right? Yeah. For example, I haven't met a single teacher who has not complained about, and rightfully so, being burned out just weeks into a new school year. Yeah. I mean, they're so excited. Whenever the summer's almost done, they're like, I'm ready to go back to my classroom, decorating my classroom, everything, right? And this is every single teacher I've met. Every single public school teacher. They're excited. The first day happens and they're excited. By maybe the 9th week, they're burned out already. Yeah. And that's just an example, right? Yeah. And there's a whole reason for the burnout. Yeah. So anyway, my question, what can you do?
Okay, I think I understand. So there's a couple of things. So number one, teaching is going to be difficult no matter what, right? And the generations that have changed, right? I admit, because I've been downtown for so long, I'm a bureaucrat now, right? I haven't been in the classroom for a long time. You can do the math, right? So I remember
you were a teacher and you were an assistant.
I was a
principal.
teacher. I was an assistant principal, right? But even when I was a teacher in the late 90s, early 2000s, a comment that we always make to each other is, man, these students are very different from when we were in high school. And that was like 10 years earlier. So we know now that these students 20 years later are way different from the way that they were in the 90s. Way different than even the early 2000s, right? I have students that are already in their 40s, you know? So, you know, we know that the generations change. And the generations nowadays are very, very tough to teach, right? I have so many friends who were teachers when we first started, and they're like, man, I can't wait to retire. These kids nowadays are so different. The technology, which they're so easily distracted.
Kids have never been smarter, right? Kids have never been smarter. They are so smart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just very, very different, right? So we know that it's going to be tough no matter what. But what we need to do kind of on our end is whatever the requirements are, initiatives, we need to make sure they're clear on what those are. We need to help them prioritize, and this is something that we work with principals on, right? We say, these are all the different things that we're asked to do. Make sure that they have the training, make sure that they have the support, but it can't be like, hey, just do it. Just do it, just do it, just do it, just do it. There has to be that ongoing back and forth conversation with the teachers. And again, that's something that we work with the principals on. Because even for us, that's something we work with them about their assignments. For example, we have, I think it's 9 or 10 new principals, right, that are new to, not new as assistant principals, but they just got promoted and they're new to their job. That's a lot. So we have a separate chat with them. And one of the things that, you know, they kind of separate chat, you know, on the side now, asking for, you know, Mr. Sanchez, we have to do this, and I would remind them, well, yes, you need to do that, but you can slow down. This is the relationship that we've tried to build. We can't control the schools by remote control. We can provide the training, we can provide the guidance, we can provide the direction, but the principal has to be the instructional leader of the school. So they basically take their school level plan, and I'm pretty sure every teacher has heard this by now, because we just recently did an update to the implementation of their school level plan, and talk about what you accomplished last year and what your plans are to accomplish this coming school year, right? This current school year that's in existence. Because you can't do everything that is listed as our initiative. If you try to do everything, you end up not achieving anything.
Burning out.
Yeah, you end up burning out. So we try to make sure principals understand that they need to work with their teachers. That's that whole collaborative piece. Remember when we talked about the collaboration in the first strategic plan? We wanted to instill that in the entire department so that teachers can work together with each other and their administration to put together that school improvement plan and agree on, okay, what is it that we could reasonably accomplish this school year? And again, it doesn't mean that it's going to be easy, but it's going to be reasonable and it's going to be something that they all kind of agree on. The worst thing that I tell principals, I said, the worst thing that you can do for any initiative is tell a teacher, oh, because downtown said. And I know that's happened, you know, or Joe Sanchez said. The idea is you have to work with your teachers and develop your own plan, your own timeline, and then move forward with that. So I think as superintendent, what I would do is I would reinforce that understanding. Is, hey, yes, we do have district mandates. Yes, we do have district goals, because there is an expectation that all schools improve. There is an expectation that not only our scores go up, but everybody continues to be safe. There is a district-wide expectation that we continue to pass our public health inspection. All of those things are district mandates that, yes, we have to hold people accountable for. But at the same time, the manner in which that's done has to be at the school level. It has to be crafted, and I'll use the term agreed upon, but you know, sometimes people won't agree to everything, but there has to be some type of deliberate consensus that this is how the school wants to move forward. And to be honest, I mean, I've never heard a school say, we don't want to be successful. I've never heard a school say, no, we don't want to do this because we just don't want to do this. That never happens. In fact, I know a lot of teachers, I'll bet you if you walk into any coffee shop, and I run into them all the time. There's teachers doing their lesson plans. There's teachers who are doing their, grading papers or whatnot because they're working over the weekend. Sometimes you do have to tell them, hey, you need to slow down because we don't want you to burn out. That's one thing that we have a program that school-based mentoring program where we try to mentor teachers that are first, second, third year. They take on a lot.
Oh, you still have that program?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. In fact,
I remember when you guys implemented that program.
Yeah.
And it was a pilot program, matter of fact.
It was.
From a grant.
It was, and now it's just kind of expanded.
It was
so
the teaching excellence grant, right?
Yeah. So I can talk more about that because I want to give credit to the previous folks who did that. But one of the things that we're finding with new teachers is they want to do everything. Sure. It's like, I want this, I want this, I want this. And they're like, hey, you might want to slow down just a little bit. And we have senior teachers who are their mentors. And they basically tell them, okay, we love the fact that you want to be on 4 committees, and we love the fact that you want to do all of these activities in your classroom, but you really do need to find the pace because this is only your first year, this is only your second year, and so on. So I'm thinking that as they get, more maybe their 10th year or 15th year, those teachers can probably find more of a balance where it's like, okay, yes, I want to be on these committees. Yes, I want to, provide all of these activities, but I want to do so where it's reasonable for us to kind of pull back a little. Because if you burn out, what did you say, the 9th week? If you burn out your 9th week, oh my gosh, you still got how many more weeks left?
And these are seasoned teachers who I know.
These are seasoned teachers. Okay.
Yes, and it's just, it gets to be a lot. And
okay. So then, I would tell them, feel free to slow down because you have to.
So we've talked about your relationship with teachers, your relationship with principals. Let me ask you something that's a little more tricky.
Sure.
That's something that I've been made aware of by teachers as well, and it's the problems that some of them run in with some, not a majority, nowhere near a majority, but some principals who, these teachers would describe with words like commandant, toxic, and I know this is a little bit of a tricky subject, but is there anything that what would you do as superintendent when you would hear something like that directly from a teacher, or where you hear that teachers in a certain school don't even want to approach you or your team at Central because they're afraid of being retaliated against by their principal if their principal found out?
So I do get that.
Okay.
And I think part of that is so I've done this for years. So teachers have my number. So every professional development or training or whatever, I give out my number. And if anybody were to ask, I give it to teachers all the time. I say, just feel free to call me whenever you want. I just ask them, realistically, give me a favor though, if it's kind of a simple question, if you can just text text my staff or text your principal or somebody. But if it gets a little more complicated, then call me, right? So so in the morning and during the day and weekends, most of my texts are from teachers.
Okay.
Asking a question about, hey, Mr. Sanchez, is it true that we have to do this and whatnot? So I'm usually kind of explaining things to them in a different way. But because I have that relationship with some teachers, they rightfully so feel open enough to talk to me about their principles.
Okay.
And they'll say, hey, Mr. Sanchez, and I don't know, I get it. Sometimes they'll text first, please don't tell my principal. Sure. I'm like, okay, I get it, right? Please don't text my principal. And then they'll ask me a question. And I'll say, okay, well, I can address that because I think sometimes it's simple, sometimes it's a little more complicated. But I'll tell them, I said, okay, well, first of all, if you don't want me to tell your principal, I won't. But
that makes things more difficult.
It makes it difficult for me to address. So I have a strategy on that. I'm telling you my strategy now with principals, so they'll know the secret. But if I get comments from a teacher, what I would do is I would make a response or give guidance generally. I'll say, hey, just to clarify, folks, this does not need to happen. You need to do this, right? Or this might be the best way, right? So for example, I'll give you something very specific, like Mr. Sanchez, they said that our principal said you cannot teach outside the priority standard skills and topics, which is not true. Our priority standards, skills, and topics are the priority, right? You must teach these, but it doesn't mean you don't teach the rest. In fact, you have to teach the rest. It's just, if you can't get to it, then as long as you do the priorities. Well, we did have, I think, 2 principals that said, no, you absolutely cannot do this. So I'm identifying the person by describing it, but let's just say the teacher had these 2 events during the year. They were very proud of it. They've done it every year for the last so many years. The students love it. The administrator said, no, we're cutting that, and you're not going to do that because it's not part of the priority standards for the adopted. So I said, okay, let me clarify that, because it may not be a priority standard, but it absolutely is a regular standard. You can teach that. In fact, I've been to that event, and I love it. So I think it should not be cut. So I was trying to figure out how am I going to do this with the, I'm describing it so they're going to know what happens. But anyway, the point is, I was able to meet with a group of administrators and say, hey, just to let you guys know, try to work with your teachers so you're not cutting out activities or events that you feel are worthwhile.
Okay, so you handle these things with courtesy, basically.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And consideration.
Because the worst thing you want to do is you don't want to make it worse for the teacher, or not just the teacher. Sometimes it happens with staff. So the teacher assistants are under my office, right? So whenever there's an issue with a teacher assistant, know that a teacher assistant is hired based on the recommendation of the principal. But sometimes there's like a friction or something that happens where the teacher assistant feels they're not being treated fairly. So I would have to kind of intervene. And a lot of times it's based on, I guess not always, but I would say sometimes it's personalities, or sometimes someone was offended and you're now breaching on my authority and they don't like you or whatever, right? And sometimes staff feel very vulnerable, especially if you're limited term and it's based on the principal's decision, that it causes that fear in the employee. And I'll say, okay, first of all, I will make sure that this is fair, but you have to understand that this is your daily supervisor. You don't see me every day. This supervisor approves your leave, allows you to leave early, come late, whatever. So you need to work on that relationship. So what I sometimes would do is talk to administrators, strategically, and say, hey, please be mindful of the importance of relationship building and so on. And then I would tell the staff the same thing about be mindful of showing respect and so on.
And this works. It diffuses the problem.
I believe that it works because the feedback that I get, I mean, if I were to think of some examples, sometimes it rises to the level where I have to tell Dr. Adamas or Erica at the time, say, hey, I think there needs to be some intervention here. But generally, I think it works because the best way to deal with those issues between staff and their supervisors is really at the lowest level. If it's personalities, can you work that out? If it's work ethic, then that's kind of a different area or different issue.
Would you continue to have these types of relationships with your employees, with your rank and file, if you were the superintendent, or would things change because you're the superintendent?
I think my leadership style is kind of based a lot on my personality and my focus on the work. So I need to collaborate. Like I can't just do things kind of on my own. I need input. I need to talk to people. And because I know
that's your style.
That's my style, and because I'm very familiar with the research on change theory, we know that it cannot be top down. It cannot be, hey, you need to do this. Everybody needs to do this. There has to be, periodic check-ins. There has to be clarification of the vision. There has to be opportunities for input in order for any initiative to be successful, right? So, I think that will stay the same. I don't want to create that separation, but at the same time, all of my colleagues will need to understand that if I'm the superintendent, this is a new role. And although I've never been the accountability person, this is where it's going to need to happen. Things that are normally recommendations or supportive, we might have to start looking at, areas where we have to say, no, this has to be done.
I want to move on to the final topic before I get to the big topic of what your vision is for GDOE. And that final topic, Mr. Sanchez, is, and I've spoken about this in my video editorial about the next superintendent. It's the idea of GDOE needing a proven manager, and it would help if that management was proven within GDOE already. Obviously, you've been a manager within GDOE the past several years. But it would make your case before our audience, and maybe even board members are watching, who knows, right? But make your case about your management being proven.
Well, I guess the first thing is you can't expect perfection in any manager. I mean, if you're going to try to say that does this person have a perfect record, or does the person has no failures, then I think you're just setting all of us up for failure, because I don't think that's the case with anybody. But you have to look at the general track record of each person, and I believe I've done that. I mean, some of the changes, and I want to first give John Fernandez some credit to this.
Okay.
Because one of the biggest things he did is he allowed us to break ground on a lot of new things. It may sound now, when we talk about collaborative teams and professional learning communities and data, it may sound like that's a no-brainer, but it wasn't.
Not back then, I remember.
No,
I remember
wasn't.
these were new things back then.
Even when we were teachers, it was normal for us to work in silos.
But I remember that these changes started before John Fernandez got to Guam.
Not a lot. Well, some of it was.
No, I
we
remember
were down
the
there.
Education Reform Initiative.
Yeah.
These were things that were being
brought
brought up right
yeah.
before John Fernandez
Yeah.
came
In
to
fact, I don't know if you still have a copy of that, but collaboration and all of that was brought up. Is they want more input, they want more opportunities to work together.
That came from you guys.
Yeah,
You were the educators
right.
telling us, yeah.
And you guys brought in educators, right, to talk about that. So you're absolutely right. But those were very groundbreaking, because when we were teachers, that was your classroom, and it was, let's face it. And I'm gonna plead to my teacher colleagues who remember this. It was embarrassing to even admit that you have problems in your class. It wasn't normal for you to go, hey, do you have these instructional strategies? Hey, do you have this? I mean, I had some really good teacher colleagues that did that anyway, like Marie Barreto, Derek Cruz, all of Dave Borja, rest their soul, Dave and Terry. Marie's also a great friend. I mean, I'm sorry, I started naming people, but there's like so many at Untalan that supported us, that, gave us tips and whatnot. But that was not normal in the school system. Right? It was something
that mentorship wasn't normal.
It wasn't normal, and I mean, I know that there's a mentoring program, but that came much later, right? But collaboration was not normal, and frankly, we got a lot of complaints, because when you collaborate, you're talking about how do you put a curriculum map together, how do you share instructional strategies, and for some teachers didn't want to do that. Coming out of the direct instruction program and the Successful program, where they just tell you what to do, a lot of folks just wanted to do that. Just tell us what to do. Or, in some cases, isn't that curriculum and instructions program to do that? And the research does not point in that direction. In fact, that's one of the reasons why a lot of these reform programs, they have a very high effective rate the first 2 or 3 years, but it tapers off around the 4th or 5th year. And we looked that up, where it's like, yeah, they may be good for turnaround schools. You know what turnaround schools are, right? It's the mainland and whatnot, where they'll take a school system, they'll turn it around, and now all of a sudden they're scoring high. Well, they're scoring high because they were so terrible before.
Yeah.
But once they get to a certain level, they plateau.
Yeah.
Because there's no capacity building. There's no professional environment where these teachers get better. All they do is implement the script, implement whatever. So, that was a challenge. People just wanted, I guess, I'm sorry to say, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but some people just wanted the easy way out, right? I even had one teacher, what? We have to do lesson plans? Yeah, you have to do lesson plans. I mean, you can find a collaborative way to do that, but yes, you do. And again, this is like a long time ago, so I'm not saying recently, but yeah, when we were first doing that, it was very controversial. And when John was like, let's do it. And it helped that he was actually working in DC with some districts, and they were doing some of these things for years. So he's like, yeah, go for it, right? So I was able to manage, with the help of the principals and whatnot, we were able to lead a lot of these very innovative, in some cases controversial programs that continue to be implemented today. Standards-based grading was started training in 2015. We did it all the way to 2019. Then COVID hit. I wasn't expecting standards-based grading to be at front and center during COVID, but it turned out to help us so much. Because when US Ed said you need to start prioritizing your standards, you might not be able to teach everything that you want during the pandemic, we already had a process in place to do it. So we're like, wow, I didn't realize that this was gonna help, but it did. We were able to focus, we were able to make sure people understood what the requirements were. We were able to utilize the teams that were already in existence. When we got together to decide what to do with the pandemic, we already had teacher teams who knew each other from every school. We didn't have to, can you imagine if we didn't have these in place and we had to introduce teachers for the first time? It would have been chaos. But these teachers already were working together. They were already sharing strategies. They were already sharing resources. When we had to go online, the panic that was felt by some other school districts, we didn't feel because they were all supporting each other. They were calling each other up. That networking really, really assisted. So that was a controversial, all of those initiatives required good strategic management. I also am the project manager when it comes to our major curriculum grants. These are over $30-some million, right? The implementation of all of those grants. And although I'm not the finance guy, I was always front and center when it came to the planning and trying to get our work through. And that's why I said earlier, I believe that the central office folks trust me because they know that I know all of those processes. They know that when I come in there, the purpose is to problem solve and to provide those additional supports. And quite frankly, I think, although probably before the pandemic, my management skills were just focused around curriculum, when the pandemic hit, I was front and center. I was the one that had to establish it's called the District School Readiness Task Force. I had to establish that group very quickly. I just said, hey, whoever needs to be on this team, show up. We showed up, we identified the different categories of committees. We had, I'm not exaggerating, we had over 100 Zoom sessions with the community, with parents, with students, with teachers, with administrators and staff. I mean, we were meeting constantly during that time. Normally that wouldn't be something I would do, but we just didn't have anyone to do it at the time, so I kind of led that team. When we came back, unfortunately we had Typhoon Marwar. Normally I'm not involved in typhoon recovery, but for whatever reason this needed my assistance. So I ended up being the one establishing the committee for Typhoon Marwar, and the framework that I provided for that, in addition to the following year with school closures, the committee that exists now is still using the same framework that I provided. All of those tiers. So really, it's normally it's mostly just curriculum and all of those initiatives. And I think it culminates to this, last big one was the Committee for the Maximization of Resources. It's called the Famous Commander Committee. And even when the superintendent called me in and said, hey, I need you to take care of this, school maximization and school closures. I'm like, what? Like, why? I'm the curriculum guy. Just, no, but, I had too many people say that you need to be the one to do this, so I need you to do this. And I believe that was people recognizing that I would have been the best person to do that. So really, I think I've also assisted in so many other operational matters that I've demonstrated my management abilities.
You are definitely the instructional leader of you're like literally the instructional leader of the Department of Education as the curriculum head, right? How does that translate? Well, if you were to become the superintendent, will that translate into you taking that, you're the instructional leader of the entire Department of Education, and if so, how will that filter down so that you have instructional leadership that from the superintendent through the central office to the principals to the collaboration pods among teachers, instructional leadership that affects learning? What's going to go on there?
I want to say that instructional leadership should be at the forefront of every superintendent, because everything else that exists is supposed to support instruction, which supports students, and that has to be the center of all our planning. I mean, all of these issues with budget and funding and whatnot, I really feel sometimes we forget why that exists.
They're ancillary to...
Yeah, we need to support teachers because these teachers work directly with the students. These students need these materials and supplies because this is going to assist them in their education. And sometimes I think, I mean, and again, I don't want to criticize anybody. I hope they don't get offended by this, but it shows sometimes we forget who our customer is. We forget who we're serving. I'll give you an example. Processes when it comes to something as simple as paying a teacher stipend. So you talked about these teachers being burnt out and working so hard. Well, we still have teachers who teach after school, before school, summer school. Some do additional projects for us that are working teams, development teams, and so on. The least we could do is pay their stipend on time. And I'm not blaming a particular group or person, but the process takes so long that if I work after school, after school program, I'm supposed to get paid this quarter, and then I'm not getting paid until 2-3 months later. How does that make that teacher feel? And it's so frustrating to see where these things are and to be told, oh, we're getting to that, we're getting to that, we're getting to that. I'm like, why? These people are waiting. And what's so demoralizing, I feel, and I'm not saying they should stop doing it, but I really feel bad when a teacher has to call me and say, Mr. Sanchez, I need this check because, can you please help me get paid for after school because I need it to pay a bill or something like that. Why do they have to do that? We should be paying them on time automatically. They shouldn't have to.
You're getting emotional because
they shouldn't have to beg for payment for something that they've already done. And it frustrates me because I'm limited in what I can do. I'm limited in the position that I have and the authority that I have. But that's what I want to fix because right now these teachers have worked so hard on the PLCs that we do, the collaborative teams, trying to implement new programs that are there, the reading programs and whatnot. And the least we can do as a system is support them, at least on the basics. I'm not even talking about new supports. Just get them the materials that they need on time. The procurement process needs to be sped up because again, we've asked teachers for years, even during the pandemic, we've asked them for, give us your wish list. What can we order? And then get it to them. It was funny because a few years back, we had a whole big order that we sent out to the teachers, and they said, "Oh my gosh, it feels like Christmas. We're getting all these materials. Thank you so much for these materials." And in my head, I'm going, "Yeah, I'm really glad that you're happy you got those, but we ordered those 2 years ago, and now we're just getting it to you, right?" So that system needs to be fixed because again, I believe that the curricular structure and instructional structure is already in place. We just need to get them the supplies that they need on time. If they work to do these other projects or whatnot, we need to pay them their stipends on time. And they shouldn't have to be demoralized to go downtown to beg for payment. Those payments need to get to them automatically without them asking. And anything else that, the personnel that needs to be hired. We're short on paraeducators. We're short on regular teacher assistants. We're short on regular school personnel. All of that needs to be addressed. And again, I'm not pointing fingers, but there's parts of the process that need to be fixed where we say, this is what the school needs. How can we fix this whole set of steps so that we make sure that they have the personnel? I feel terrible about the principals and how they're so, every morning they're worried about who's gonna cover their special education students who need a paraeducator. Because right now we don't have the funding to get those paraeducators in place. So they're utilizing teacher assistants from our other grant to cover those positions. But even our teacher assistants are not fully hired. So we need to be able to hire those positions, right? So at least getting the basic supports to the schools. supplies, materials, personnel. All of that needs to happen.
And the final thing I wanted to talk about, Mr. Sanchez, is let's say tomorrow the Board of Education chooses you to be the superintendent. So 4 years from tomorrow will be the end of your term. What's your vision? What's going to happen within those 4 years? And I'd like you to couch this in terms of students and how things will improve for them over the next 4 years.
Yeah. Well, I hope it doesn't sound too presumptuous to say, I believe we've already started. You know, I was the lead again for the strategic plan most recently in 2022. And when we crafted that plan, it was really taking us forward. Our discussions were the next 10 years. We know that it's a 5-year plan, but we were actually looking forward even beyond that, because we knew that it takes time for a system to adjust. We believe that a lot of the work that we've already done, the collaborative piece, the clarification of the curriculum, the sharing of ongoing instructional strategies, the use of data is a big piece in this current strategic plan. That, you know, we want to be able to use all of that, strengthen those, and move forward. The difference between what I'm doing now and what I'm going to do as superintendent, I'm going to make sure that all of the other areas support that plan. You mentioned about, you know, what would be different, you know, from all of these supports to teachers and whatnot, is I would make the current system work. Because again, if we do the basics, get them the materials and supplies that they need, get them paid when they're doing all of these supplemental programs, because these supplemental programs helped us raise the graduation rates, you know, over the last, you know, 10 or 15 years or so. So get them that compensation on time, making sure that we're able to provide the personnel that's necessary at the schools, because those are just basic bottom line things that need to be supported. So beyond that, with the strategic plan, one is diversification of our curriculum. You know, we recognize that not all students want to go to college, right? They have so many different options, but at the same time, they need to understand the workforce more. In February of this past year, we participated in like the annual Association for Career and Technical Education. In fact, I'm one of the first members, I think it's 10 years ago, where it was first established, where we recognize that a diploma is not enough. You can't just graduate with a diploma. You have to have some sense of planning of what you're going to do next, right? And that's something that we've instilled in all of our high schools, where I believe it's in all of our middle schools now, because now they're reporting back that all of our middle and high schools are implementing some form of CTE principles, which includes the development of soft skills, problem-solving communication, and so on, as well as career awareness. What are the jobs available out there in the community? She's in high school. Basically, you know, they have the career academies. You know, we provided that training over 10 years ago. You know, Teason High School went full force to do full academies. Simon Center, I think, is following suit. Other schools continue to provide career and technical education offerings. I established a relationship 10 years ago with the Guam Trades Academy, the Contractors Association. So students who are in DOE can now go to the Trades Academy at no cost to them, and they're able to get certification. So we have about over 100 students that have already kind of been participating over the last, I think it might even be more than that. I have to get the numbers.
And we need more of them to answer.
And we definitely need more of them. But you know, that kind of covers that piece, right? The idea is we need to provide students more of those opportunities. We've expanded our arts program, you know, so we now have dance, we have audiovisual communications. For the first time, we have art in all of the middle schools and the high schools. We're pushing now more for music.
You guys need to get instruments into all of the schools.
Yes, yes. You know, unfortunately,
it's expensive, I know.
You know, no, but you know, during COVID, we had a whole procurement, and this is I'll go ahead and share this. We had a whole procurement for what's called the supplemental instructional materials. So we were purchasing equipment for all the schools, physical education, music, you know, social studies, you know, and whatnot. That procurement didn't go through, right? So we had to shift, and we had to rewrite it where we said, no, we're going to utilize effective instructional strategies. So luckily that was approved by USN. That's about a little over $50-some million under ARP. We got approved for that, but the intent was to purchase more materials. So Yeah, that's definitely something that we plan to do. Unfortunately, we're unable to do that. But the idea is diversification of the curriculum, that's one. Two, continuing on with intervention for students. We need to train our folks more. Not that they're doing a bad job, but we just need to make sure that we understand what a student needs when they come from a family that is living in poverty. We're now seeing more homeless students. Well, we think that we've had a lot of homeless students before, but now it's becoming more self-identified and it's becoming more prevalent. We have to learn how to deal with students who have families or maybe even they are on drugs. That's a big challenge where it's now generational. We have to make sure that we understand English learners and their families. We know that we have generations of families where although they were born on Guam, they're still English learners because they've never really developed a strong use of the English language. So understanding all of those challenges with our families, we are now able to design better, more successful and effective interventions. And then lastly is making sure that every student has the basic knowledge and skills to be successful and have a plan after high school. We're not able to provide training in every possible career field or every possible job direction. But we want to make sure that they have the basic academic skills, the knowledge about the workforce and the economy, which includes finance. Finance is a big topic that has been coming up, but we need to make sure that they have a plan and they understand that sometimes that plan is going to change as they go through life.
Good luck to you, Mr. Sanchez.
Thank you.
And I really appreciate your time this afternoon and spending all this time with our audience and with answering my questions. And it was quite comprehensive.
Great, thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank
that.
you so much.
Right.
Well,
Thank
don't
you
go
too.
anywhere because Cold Stone Creamery is going to treat us to some ice cream. So just hold on, all right?
Okay, sounds good. Thanks.
Do you know what you want, Joe?
Something cookies and cream.
Something
You have that?
cookies and cream.
Yeah.
The size?
What's that?
The size?
I'll get the small one.